They looked flawless. Perfect skin, perfect bodies, perfect smiles. But behind the camera, it was a different story. Old Hollywood stars were under constant pressure to meet impossible beauty standards. Studios controlled everything: what they wore, how they spoke, and even how their bodies looked. Some were forced into painful surgeries. Others hid deformities, medical conditions, or drastic transformations. These secrets were never meant to reach the public. We're pulling back the curtain. Here are 12 shocking body secrets old Hollywood tried to hide. Things that will completely change the way you see these stars. Loretta Young, the vanishing starlet and the baby no one was meant to see. For over a year, Loretta Young disappeared. At the peak of her fame in the 1930s, she simply stepped away from the spotlight, giving no real explanation. Fans were left wondering, was she ill, overworked, or hiding something? When she returned, she brought with her a mysterious, adopted child. What no one realized at the time was that the little girl was not adopted at all. She was Loretta's biological daughter. To the world, Loretta kept her figure, her poise, and her career intact. But behind the scenes, she had gone to extreme lengths to hide her pregnancy from the press, from the studios, even from friends. In an era where unwed motherhood could destroy a career overnight, the stakes were brutally high. Wardrobe designers worked overtime to keep her image pristine. She wore loose, flowing garments in publicity stills and kept her public appearances carefully staged until she fell ill and vanished altogether. After giving birth in secret, Loretta arranged for the child to be raised in a separate home, later orchestrating a reintroduction into her life as a public adoption. The deception lasted for decades. In interviews, she spoke of the special bond she had with her daughter, never revealing why it was so deep. What makes this secret so striking isn't just the cover-up, it's how successfully it was carried out. Every photo, every outfit, every smile was part of a carefully constructed illusion. And even as her body changed, she never let the cracks show. Loretta Young didn't just hide a pregnancy. She rewrote her own story, frame by frame, and Hollywood helped her do it. And Miller, the woman who danced faster than humanly possible. And Miller didn't walk into a scene, she exploded into it. Hair bouncing, legs flashing, and tap shoes firing like machine guns, she became one of the most electrifying dancers to ever grace a soundstage. But what the audience never saw, and what the studios carefully kept quiet, was the anatomical oddity that made her movements so extreme, and the private pain that came with it, and was born with an extra vertebra in her spine. One more bone than most people have, a strange, invisible gift that granted her flexibility, balance, and a range of motion few dancers could compete with. She could kick higher, turn faster, and maintain perfect posture while tapping at speeds that seemed physically impossible. She famously claimed she could tap 500 times per minute. It sounded like a publicity stunt. It wasn't, but the same thing that set her apart also wore her down. That extra vertebra put immense strain on her back and hips, especially under the pressure of hours-long rehearsals in heavy heels and corseted costumes. Off camera, she suffered from chronic pain that she was told to ignore. Studios didn't want a damaged dancer, they wanted a machine. And for years, that's what they got. Her body was her instrument, her product, her prison. There were no stunt doubles, no edits to cover mistakes. What you saw on screen was real. Every spin, every impossible kick, every brutal landing. Behind her wide smile was a woman who was constantly told, "You're not tired, you're perfect." And so, she kept dancing. And Miller wasn't just fast. She was faster than biology said she should be. And no one, not the audience, not the studio, not even the other dancers, ever truly understood the price she paid to move like that. Hedy Lamarr, the face of perfection, the feat no one was allowed to see. She was once called the most beautiful woman in the world. Her face, cold, flawless, almost unreal, was the gold standard of old Hollywood glamour. Hedy Lamarr wasn't just a screen siren. She was beauty itself, frozen in black and white. But there was one part of her body the cameras were never allowed to show: her feet. Hedy Lamarr had webbed toes. A rare condition, and in her case, not severe, but enough to terrify studio executives who were obsessed with control. In an era where physical perfection wasn't just expected, it was manufactured, even a minor deviation could spark panic. So it became a rule on set: no barefoot scenes, no sandals, no close-ups below the ankle. Costume designers were instructed to keep her feet fully covered at all times. Even swimsuit shoots were carefully staged, with artful shadows, cropped frames, or conveniently placed props. Hedy herself was deeply private about the condition. She never confirmed it in interviews, never joked about it, never even hinted. For someone known to be bold and outspoken, her silence on the matter only added to the mystery. Some say she was embarrassed. Others believe she simply refused to let the illusion crack. And it worked. Audiences remained hypnotized by her face, her voice, her elegance. No one noticed the careful choreography that kept her feet off camera. Decades later, when rumors surfaced about her secret, fans were stunned. Could someone so flawless really have something so human? That was the magic of Hedy Lamarr. She could redesign herself, frame by frame, until the truth no longer mattered. Because in the world of old Hollywood, beauty wasn't about being real. It was about being believed. Vera-Ellen, the dancer with the disappearing neck. Vera-Ellen floated across the screen like a ghost in satin. Her movements were sharp, clean, and impossibly light, as if gravity had never touched her. In films like White Christmas, she danced beside the biggest names in Hollywood, but somehow remained slightly apart, always graceful, always precise, yet strangely distant. Audiences admired her elegance, but few noticed the thing that wasn't there, her neck. In nearly every scene, Vera-Ellen wore high collars, scarves, or chokers that covered her throat completely. Even in casual publicity stills, the fabric never slipped. At first, no one questioned it. The style suited her, and the fashion of the era made it easy to overlook. But as the pattern continued, it became clear that this wasn't a coincidence. Her neck was being hidden deliberately, and no one, not the studio, not Vera herself, ever offered a reason why. Over the years, speculation began to circulate. Some whispered that she was hiding premature aging. Others pointed to her dangerously thin frame and guessed at something more troubling. Vera-Ellen was famously slender, even by Hollywood's harsh standards. Some said her neck showed signs of physical decline, muscle loss, skin damage, even bruising from the strain of extreme dieting. Whether the truth was medical or cosmetic, it was never explained. But the image had to be protected. Costume designers became her silent allies. Necklines were altered. Jewelry was custom-fitted. Lighting was adjusted to avoid casting shadows that might draw attention. Every scene was designed not just to showcase her beauty, but to conceal a part of it. What makes Vera-Ellen's case so haunting isn't just what was hidden, but how effectively it was erased. Her talent was extraordinary, but her body was treated like a delicate illusion, something to be managed, masked, and never questioned. George Reeves, the man of steel made of foam and fabric. To an entire generation, George Reeves was Superman. Broad-shouldered, square-jawed, and seemingly indestructible, he flew across black and white television screens like a living comic book come to life. Children idolized him. Adults saw him as the perfect symbol of post-war American masculinity. But behind the cape, Reeves was fighting a quiet battle, not with villains, but with his own aging body. By the time he took on the role in the early 1950s, Reeves was no longer the lean, athletic figure he had been in his younger film career. He was approaching 40, and years of career ups and downs had taken their toll. His weight had shifted, his muscle tone had softened, and the demanding physicality of playing a superhero was becoming harder to fake. The studio had a choice: replace him or reinforce the illusion. They chose the latter. Reeves's iconic Superman costume was modified to do more than just replicate the comic book look. It was engineered to hide his real body. The suit was padded with foam to simulate defined chest and abdominal muscles, giving the illusion of a superhero physique he no longer had. His belt was lifted higher to disguise his midsection. The cape, often flowing dramatically behind him, doubled as a visual distraction, covering his back and shoulders in wide shots. On set, camera angles were chosen carefully to avoid unflattering perspectives. Lighting was adjusted to create false depth, carving shadows where muscles should have been. Even his movements were slowed down and choreographed to seem powerful rather than spry. Audiences never questioned it. To them, he was invincible. But beneath the surface, George Reeves was a man stitched into a myth, held together with padding, tailoring, and the quiet fear that one day the illusion would come undone. Jean Peters, the star who stepped out of the light, and took her face with her. Jean Peters had everything a studio could sell: flawless skin, refined features, and a screen presence that felt both warm and untouchable. She was marketed as the natural beauty, sophisticated but never artificial, glamorous without effort. For a time, she seemed poised to become one of Hollywood's most enduring stars. Then, at the height of her career, she disappeared. No scandals, no headlines, no dramatic exit. She married billionaire Howard Hughes and almost overnight stepped out of public life. Her career was over. For the next several decades, she avoided cameras almost entirely. Photographers couldn't find her. Reporters couldn't reach her. The face that once lit up movie screens became a question mark. Over time, rumors began to take root, strange, persistent whispers that Jean Peters had been physically altered. Some claimed Hughes, obsessed with control and secrecy, had demanded she undergo cosmetic procedures. Others said she'd suffered a facial injury and had chosen to hide herself from the world. Nothing was ever confirmed, and no clear photographs emerged to silence the speculation. What made the mystery more disturbing was the absolute precision of her vanishing. No red carpet appearances, no late career cameos, no memoirs or interviews. The woman once known for her striking, symmetrical face had erased herself so completely that it seemed intentional, as if her beauty, once commodified by studios, had become something she no longer wanted seen. Jean Peters didn't grow old in the public eye. She faded, quietly and methodically, until the image no longer existed. Her face became legend, not for what it was, but for how completely it disappeared. Frances Farmer, the actress who vanished inside herself. Frances Farmer was never easy to shape. Brilliant, beautiful, and famously defiant, she pushed back against the rules of Hollywood from the very beginning. She refused to play the game, and in old Hollywood, that came with a price. The studios saw her independence as instability. Over time, so did the press. And slowly, what began as a career built on talent became a quiet, brutal story of control. After a series of public incidents and conflicts with studio heads, Farmer was institutionalized. What happened inside those locked doors has never been fully confirmed. Her medical records are incomplete. Her own accounts shifted over time. But when she was released years later, she wasn't the same. She returned with a body that moved differently. Her face, once expressive and fierce, seemed subdued. She avoided the camera, appeared in only a handful of small roles, and carried a stiffness that hadn't been there before. Her voice was flatter, her gaze more distant. Audiences noticed, but no one could explain it. Whispers circulated that she had been subjected to extreme medical procedures. Some believe her appearance and posture hinted at surgical intervention, perhaps even something neurological. Others said it was the medication. Still others claimed the truth was darker, irreversible, and meant to silence her permanently. But nothing was ever proven. The silence around her was as tight and intentional as any studio cover-up. The tragedy of Frances Farmer isn't just in what happened, it's in what was never allowed to be known. Her body, once seen as a vessel for fame, became a symbol of something else entirely. What happens when the industry doesn't just abandon its stars, but rewrites them from the inside out. Montgomery Clift, the actor with two faces. Montgomery Clift was the kind of beautiful that made people stop breathing. His face, sharp, sensitive, almost fragile, carried something deeper than good looks. It made audiences feel. In the golden age of matinee idols, he wasn't just another leading man. He was art. But all of that changed in a matter of seconds on a winding road in the dead of night. The crash shattered him. His car slammed into a telephone pole after leaving a dinner party at Elizabeth Taylor's home. She was the first to find him, pulling broken teeth from his throat so he wouldn't choke. His face was destroyed, jaw broken, cheekbone crushed, lips torn open. But the studios didn't just rebuild Monty. They remade him. Surgeons worked to reconstruct his face with metal plates and delicate stitching, but the symmetry was gone. The left side remained elegant and camera-ready. The right was swollen, tight, and visibly altered. From that moment on, Clift's films became a war of angles and shadows. Directors shot him only from his left side. Cinematographers softened the light, blurred the edges, and worked overtime to restore what the accident had taken. But the camera doesn't lie, and neither did Clift's performance. His body moved differently. His speech changed, slower, more measured, as if speaking through the wreckage. The pain followed him from set to set. He was no longer the man the audience had fallen for, and yet he was something more. Raw, haunted, human. Montgomery Clift didn't just survive a crash. He survived the impossible task of carrying two versions of himself, the beautiful illusion the world remembered, and the broken truth it wasn't ready to see. Lena Basquette, the star whose crown was ripped away. In the silent film era, Lena Basquette was a rising comet, elegant, striking, and camera-ready by the time she was barely a teenager. She had the kind of face that studios love to mold and market, and they wasted no time doing exactly that. But while the public saw fresh, fashionable beauty, they never saw what was happening beneath her carefully styled hair. Lena's look was always evolving. Bleached, curled, waved, and teased into whatever was in vogue, her hair became one of her trademarks. But to keep up with the relentless image demands, she was subjected to intense chemical treatments, brutal heat styling, and constant manipulation, often daily, sometimes for hours at a time. Over time, the damage became irreversible. By her early 20s, Lena had developed severe scalp trauma. Hair loss set in, first in patches, then spreading. Her once thick waves thinned dramatically. The studio's solution wasn't rest or recovery, it was concealment. Stylists were ordered to cover bald spots with wigs, elaborate finger waves, or artificial fillers sewn into her natural hair. Publicists kept photographers away from overhead angles. Costumers even redesigned headpieces and hats to keep eyes away from the hairline. No one spoke of it. To admit that her appearance was deteriorating would have been to admit she was aging, breaking down, a death sentence in the eyes of the industry. So they kept the illusion alive, strand by strand, shot by shot. Lena Basquet's scalp was a battlefield, burned, scarred, and hidden beneath layers of glamour. She wore her damage in silence because in early Hollywood, even pain had to be beautiful. Maria Montez, the body that couldn't breathe. She was known as the Queen of Technicolor, and for good reason. Maria Montez radiated on screen, glowing skin, bold costumes, and curves that looked sculpted for legend. She played goddesses, queens, and enchantresses, always wrapped in silk and sequins, always impossibly poised. But behind those shimmering gowns was a secret stitched into every scene. Her waist wasn't just small. It was engineered to be unnatural. Montez's signature look came at a price most viewers never imagined. Studio designers went to extreme lengths to exaggerate her hourglass figure. Her costumes were built not just to dazzle but to compress, pulling her waist inward with steel bone corsets so tight she could barely stand. On some sets, she wore them for hours without a break, even between takes. Breathing became shallow. Eating was restricted. At least once, she collapsed on set. The goal wasn't to look real. It was to create an illusion so bold, so exaggerated that it became myth. Technicolor cameras enhanced every shimmer and shadow. Under hot lights, with restricted movement and little oxygen, Montez was expected to move like a goddess while her body strained just to stay upright. Her image was celebrated as natural beauty, a fantasy made flesh. But her figure was the result of tight choreography, extreme costuming, and constant discomfort. Even her posture was adjusted, shoulders back, chin high, to keep the illusion sharp. Any moment of slouching or strain was cropped out or res hot. Maria Montez didn't just wear costumes, she was trapped inside them. And the shape that made her a star wasn't a gift of nature. It was a cage, built by designers, maintained by silence, and worshipped by an audience that never saw what it cost her to wear it. Harold Lloyd, the hand that wasn't there. Harold Lloyd made audiences laugh, gasp, and hold their breath, sometimes all within a single scene. He was the everyman-turned-action hero, dangling from clock towers, leaping across rooftops, and grinning through it all with his signature round glasses. But there was one detail the camera never showed. For most of his career, Harold Lloyd had only one fully functioning hand. In 1919, at the height of his rising fame, Lloyd was posing for promotional photos when a prop bomb exploded in his hand. It wasn't supposed to be real, but the blast was very real, and it changed his body forever. He lost 2 fingers and much of the flesh and bone from his right hand. For many actors, the injury would have ended everything. For Harold, it became the ultimate illusion. With the help of a custom-designed prosthetic glove, made of skin-toned rubber and shaped to match his original hand, Lloyd returned to the screen without missing a beat. His movements were choreographed to perfection, his hand always positioned just so. He learned to use his left hand for precise actions, while the prosthetic served as a visual stand-in. Camera angles were meticulously planned. Editing covered transitions. The audience never knew. He climbed buildings. He threw punches. He waved to the crowd, all with a hand that could no longer move, no longer feel. And yet, his physical performances only grew more daring. Every time he reached out in a scene, he was reaching with a hand that wasn't fully there. Every close-up was a lie crafted with precision and courage. Harold Lloyd didn't just act with one hand. He redefined what it meant to perform. And in a world that prized physical perfection, he he pulled off one of the most convincing illusions in Hollywood history. William Holden, the hairline that Hollywood drew in. William Holden was the embodiment of the classic American leading man, clean-cut, confident, and effortlessly handsome. Whether playing the rugged soldier, the reluctant romantic, or the disillusioned anti-hero, he did it all with a quiet charisma that never cracked. But what the audience didn't know was that Holden's hair, the sharp side part, the carefully tousled waves, was just another costume. By his early 30s, Holden was going bald. Not slightly thinning, balding. For most men, it might have been just another part of life. But in 1950s Hollywood, it was a crisis. A receding hairline didn't just change your look, it changed your casting. Youth, virility, sex appeal, all of it was tied to appearance. So the studios stepped in and masked the truth with a simple solution, a wig. Not just any wig. Holden's hairpieces were made to exacting standards, styled and fitted by top specialists, updated frequently to match lighting changes and shooting angles. Some were sewn into place for weeks during filming. Others were applied and removed daily, depending on how close the camera would get. It became a quiet routine, unspoken on set, unmentioned in interviews. Directors avoided rain scenes. Cinematographers softened the light just enough. In romantic close-ups, Holden's hair was always pristine, untouched by sweat or wind. Off-screen, it was a different story. Friends and insiders knew. Crew members helped maintain the illusion. But to the audience, he remained whole. Holden didn't just wear a wig. He wore a myth, one of strength, ease, and timeless charm. And like so many stars of his era, the truth of his body was hidden beneath layers of craft, silence, and the constant pressure to appear untouched. The golden age of Hollywood was filled with light, but behind that light, there were shadows. The stories you've just heard aren't meant to tear down legends, but to remind us that these icons, no matter how perfect they seemed, were human. Behind every glamorous close-up was a carefully maintained image, and behind many of those images were secrets, some painful, some fascinating, all deeply real. These weren't just actors. They were people living under a microscope, asked to give everything, even their bodies, to keep the dream alive. And in doing so, they became part of something larger than themselves, a legacy of cinema that continues to inspire and captivate the world. If this glimpse behind the curtain moved you, surprised you, or made you see these stars in a new light, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. Which story stood out most to you? Were there any that shocked you, or made you see a familiar face differently? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more untold stories from Hollywood's hidden history. We're just getting started. Thank you for watching, and for remembering that even the brightest stars cast shadows.